Hey everyone! Common rail technology revolutionized the diesel engine industry. Unfortunately then, Dieselgate happened, and ever since 2015, the popularity of diesels have significantly declined. Despite this technology has quite a lot of positive attributes towards it. So first off, let's look at the efficiency that it creates. The reason why it is so much more efficient is because it can stratify the injection. So here is a common rail injector. It works directly from a common rail, and that is where your common rail connects to. You also have an overflow that regulates your pressure. So that maintains a very small margin of pressure within your reservoir. That is important, but I'll get to that later. So firstly, the stratification that occurs is normally around this very small tip. So as you can see, this is the actual injector tip. Unfortunately, the holes is so tiny that despite all the trying that I've done, I cannot get it to display on the camera. It is just significantly too small. That is the disadvantage of diesel injectors, because they need to atomize the fuel a lot more than petrol engines has to. And this technology is also used on petrol engines, but mainly in diesel engines because of the higher pressures that you can achieve. Now, as earlier stated, the reservoir is extremely important because the reservoir contains several thousand times the amount of fuel that is required for each injection cycle. And this is important because the larger the reservoir or storage tank is at a certain pressure, the less the pressure will drop each time you inject. So the main factor determining how much fuel you can be injecting at a specific point is how long you open the solenoid. And the solenoid is connected to a very long pin that opens and shuts the nozzle in front here. So you can inject a very specific amount of fuel with a common rail injection system, unlike low pressure injection systems, which you mostly find in all the petrol engines. Now the stratification is interesting because, as you can see, this area is significantly smaller than what your combustion chamber would be. In this case, the combustion chamber is about yay big compared to a tiny little injection point like this. And also it normally sits at quite an angle because you'd have your glow plug that comes in straight here, and you'd have your valves that sit around here, and your injector fits neatly in that whole package there. Now, as this injector has such a small area, it stratifies or causes a small area within a combustion chamber to have a lot of fuel. And that fuel is then atomized at such a level that it can combust very quickly. However, the rest of the combustion chamber still contains a lot of oxygen or induction mixture, because our atmosphere consists of oxygen as well as nitrogen and a few other small gases. And so the little area that has been stratified with fuel can ignite and then heat the rest of the oxygen and atmosphere in the combustion chamber and cause expansion of that as well. So you end up using a lot less fuel to get the same expansion rate in the combustion chamber. And that is where the whole efficiency comes in. Now, as earlier mentioned, the common rail keeps a pressure. This pressure is normally significantly higher in the combustion chamber before the ignition occurs. And that is important because you need to have a higher pressure than the internal pressure of the engine in order to cause the injector to actually inject fuel. Otherwise, the air would just rush out of the injector and push the fuel back into the fuel tank. Luckily, due to common rails in the system, it maintains a significantly higher pressure within the system. And this is normally achieved with a mechanical pump. Unfortunately, this mechanical pump does cause mechanical losses on the engine, as it is normally connected directly to the engine drive. in most cases on one of the camshafts of the engine. And if it's a V engine, often you'll have more than one pump on the high pressure side to create that high pressure. Unfortunately, because of those pumps, the mechanical losses in the engine does go up a little bit, but it is significantly outweighed by the improved efficiency that you get from this common rail injection system. Now personally, I grew up in the 2000s, so I really saw the rise and the fall of the diesel engine, and in so doing also the rise and fall of common rail technology in diesel engine. However, it was implemented or started to be implemented in 1997 by most manufacturers, because a lot of places around the world started having quite strict emission standards which needed to be met. And this technology was able to do that. And so it appears that it is quite a new technology. But the fact is, this common rail technology was developed 107 years ago by Vickers for submarine diesel engines. But because there was never really a big drive for diesel engines, because for most of the 20th century petrol prices or gasoline prices was extremely cheap, so most cars could be very inefficient and still be affordable. So in the 90s, when fuel and stuff and emissions and all of that started to cause a lot of pressures on the manufacturers, they did what they had to and made the technology smaller to fit into commercial vehicles. Now today they are very uncommon in cars because diesel engines are very uncommon. A lot of petrol engines do use this. Those engines that directly inject into the combustion chamber, like fuel stratified engines like the VW Group has, and most other manufacturers have their own version of that. So there is also application in terms of petrol, but then again, petrol is also on its way out, as seeing electrical vehicles are busy taking over the world. So at the moment, this technology has really only been relegated to ships. And on ship engines, they become even more efficient because the engines are so much bigger. And this is especially true on the massive two-stroke engines that you get in cargo ships. On those ships, some of them achieve more than 50% thermal energy efficiency from the common rail technology that they employ, which is quite significant compared to the average fuel consumption or fuel efficiency of an engine being only about 30%, and that is really good engines. If you go back in time and look at like the earliest engines, you would get engines that would be like 1 to 2% efficient. And over time we've developed that into more efficient engines to what we have today. But the problem is you still hit a hard limit at around 50%. And you can only achieve that 50% by making the engine significantly bigger. Something that would really not work in a commercial vehicle. So most vehicles, they hover around 30% efficiency, 30 to 40 around there. And mostly with normal driving style that occurs, the efficiency of engines is actually significantly lower than that even. And the reason for that is because engines are only that efficient at specific RPMs. Because at that specific RPM, the volume of air that is coming into the engine is the most efficient to create the best kind of thermal expansion within your combustion engine. Now that's normally hovers around about 3000 RPM for a petrol engine, and normally around between 1000 and 2500 RPM for diesel engines. And as seen, most of the time when you are driving, you are actually not in that range of RPMs. The engines tend to be much less efficient than that most efficient point in the RPM range. So yeah, unfortunately, common rail technologies is slowly being relegated to a past technology. Well, anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please drop a like, and as always, please subscribe.